we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sofia, and I'm the community manager here at UXL. This webinar is a part of our design leadership series, where each month we bring design leads from all over the world to share their leadership expertise and experience with us. And today's topic is very interesting and very dear to my heart, and that is successful collaboration in cross-functional teams, more specifically product and design. But before I go ahead and introduce today's guest, a couple of notes for everyone who is joining us. That is that as this is a live session, we love to make it a little bit more interactive, and we would love to hear more about you. So feel free to tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat and perhaps your name and where you're joining us from. And a little disclaimer, the session is about an hour long, and we'll save the last 15 minutes of the webinar for the Q&A session. So feel free to post your questions for our guest anytime during the webinar and stay until the very end to hear his answer. And without further ado, let me introduce you to Fouad, who is a service design and product leader with experience in various industries like fintech, energy, social services, retail, and most recently government. He is currently working as the director of service design at the Government of Alberta, where he's leading a team of 90 plus people in improving intake, problem solving, and design processes. He is known for successfully helping very multiple organizations meet their business goals by integrating design and product strategies. He is skilled in Agile methodologies, and he uses them to boost collaboration between design and product. And that's exactly one of the topics that we will be talking about today. So without me taking on way too long with the introduction, Fouad, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you. So just jumping straight in, we would love to hear more about your path. How did you get to service design? What drew you to the field? And how did you basically transition into your current role?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everybody has a kind of a whole bunch of different paths that they end up in design and product in the product world. Lots of interesting, diverse backgrounds. My background was really in technology, kind of in the early 2000s, heading into the 2010s. I really started working in management consulting. In the 2010s, I ended up doing my MBA. Which really started kind of making me shift into more of like a strategic view and strategic thinking. So when I started to think about technology and the intersection of user adoption and, why do people use technologies, it really started pushing me towards this idea of design thinking and human-centered design, like a business model innovation. And once I started kind of diving deeper into that, I really started falling in love with the idea of jobs to be done. And that of course naturally led me to thinking about, there's a user experience here, and there's a journey here that a user goes through, and they're going through a service. And that's how I got into service design, really, kind of in the mid 2013, 2014 timeframe is when I really started getting into that space. And it's been a blast ever since. Of course, that turns into a lot more kind of complex, harder projects. And then really led into, more impact and some delivery experience and expertise around taking those designs and that kind of insight into the real world. And here I am today.
Awesome. And, you just mentioned right now that you worked in different industries, different fields, and different positions. What are some of the common points that they all have? What are some common challenges you faced when working with design and product teams?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think there's kind of two major challenges when you think about integrating design and product together. Number one, I think a lot of people focus on like a production line thinking. So this idea is everyone does their job and then they hand it off to the next person down the line, and they're trying to give this like very detailed information between each step. Whereas they really should be focusing on figuring out how to build a team environment of collaboration instead. And so it's important that everybody has jobs and roles and expectations and responsibilities. But I think the idea is that, it's not just the conveyor belt. It's actually a team collaboration and a lot of working together and a lot of kind of shared understanding and shared language. So I think that's a challenge, is like people just expecting to hand things over. And I think is within design and product is just folks not being open enough about all of the work that's being done on both the design and development side. So, we get a lot of people who kind of go away and then they come back, after a while and say like, here's all of the great thinking that I did, or this is the great coding that I did. And I think the idea is that, we really live in a world now where we kind of have to show, not tell our work and show our value. So the idea is like, how do we become more open and show the progress of our work as we're doing it?
And how do we do that?
Oh, we can talk a lot about that for sure. I think one of the biggest ways is the idea of using Agile and using rituals to really help us get there. So the idea of, we say demos over decks. So, you should be able to both show your design insights that you learn on a regular basis, maybe every 2 weeks, be able to present to your stakeholders, to your team, to kind of even to your users about what you've learned over the last while. And then of course, if there is something that we're creating from a product perspective, also be able to show that every 2 weeks, right? You don't have to show very polished and great experiences. Sometimes it's as simple as showing, like my observations when I went out to the field and I did some field work or ethnography, or I did some interviews. Like, what were the insights and themes that came out of my interviews in this last week? And that's very important, even for top level stakeholders, to understand and develop some empathy around the work that we're doing.
And so basically showing what you've been doing on like in span of 2 weeks. And how long do you think a person should be, like how elaborate of that presentation should that be, if it's such a frequency, like on every 2 weeks?
Yeah, simple as 15-20 minutes to talk about kind of, this is what we did in the last 2 weeks. This is where we went, or this is what we learned. Here are some of the insights, and this is where we're going next. This is what this is aiming next, at least. Don't have to be extremely prescriptive. I mean, it is Agile, right? We're trying to determine kind of like, where to go and what exactly to do next from a understanding perspective to build a really good product. But I think it doesn't have to be that detailed, right? And that's really the key, is that if we're showing our work on the way, we're getting comfortable and we're getting our stakeholders comfortable with the idea of seeing unfinished work. They're seeing thoughts and insights, right? They're not looking for polished status reports necessarily. Maybe some executive stakeholders might be, but that's a different forum for this, right? And so the idea is that just getting comfortable with sharing insights and taking questions, right? Having conversations. Really interesting. Tell me more about that, and using that forum to be able to take questions and to build that shared language.
I see. And how has this approach, an agile approach to all of this, changed the way your team works?
Yeah, so it's kind of fundamental to the way my team works. So we have quite a few product teams in my environment. Like I mentioned, like you had mentioned, Sophia, we have over 90 service designers and roughly 80 UX designers within the Government of Alberta, and they're all working on these product teams. And so really the idea was that we want to be able to go from problem identification to an MVP within 5 to 6 months. So we're doing research, we're going through like some sort of like testing phase, concept testing, prototyping, getting into kind of our first release, and generating real value really quickly. And so I think that's really an interesting point is the laser focus on delivering value quickly. So like, what is the thing that's going to move the needle as quick as possible, the most important problems to solve? And can we do it in a smart way? And not have to spend, 6 months doing research or spending a long time in development just to realize some value or make improvements. Like how can we be faster? So from our perspective, this approach of kind of showing our work and moving really quickly is kind of key to showing value early, which earns us trust from stakeholders, and more leeway opens more doors for our teams to continue to do more work.
And how does it compare to a traditional handoff, and why did you decide to say bye to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a traditional handoff environment may be where designers create a brief, and then they hand off that fully formed brief to another vendor or a set of developers to develop the work. I think a lot of that gets lost in translation. You really lose the empathy of kind of an understanding of the problem itself when you do something like that. Our model is really connected together. So our designers are working with our developers all the way through. And so that integrated model of kind of like end to end really allows the technical people to be able to understand, like, okay, like I understand the problem that we're trying to solve, really. Like, it's not about like, oh, what's the thing I have to code? Like, what's the feature I have to code? We have to do that too, right? We have to create user stories and do these things, but what's the actual problem, right? And so the reason why we got rid of it is because you create a lot of disconnects, right? Where you end up creating features for people and you lose touch with the reality of the user experience, and you lose the real-time user feedback, right? In the old model, once you hand over, your requirements, well, how are we ensuring that we're continuing to build for our users and continuing to test our ideas and test our releases? If we just give them all the requirements up front, then we don't know if they're going to truly be successful until we test.
That's true. And, you just mentioned it's a huge team. So how do you ensure that everyone is aligned, and how do you ensure that everyone is kind of aligning their goals to the same thing?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thought about community. And so for us, it's really the key is to continue to kind of foster and open the lines of communication and create a community of practice. So I run our community of practice as the practice lead for service design. And you have to create a couple of like mechanisms for people to work with each other and stay engaged. And so one of our big things that we do that I think works really well, and many organizations that start to have, like 3, 4, 5 designers, they start to have kind of monthly guild meetings or certain, practice meetings where they come, they share their work across the organization, they demo to each other, like, hey, this is the work here, what do you think? And then they also have the ability to get input from other people who have like a fresh view or cold eyes on something, right? And so this idea of like a regular touch point and check in within your own internal design community in your organization, I think is extremely valuable. And for us, our guild is very well attended. Typically, we have between 60 to 70 of our people show up every month. And we bring in guest speakers. We go through like different things, like this is all about research, or this is all about scoping, or this is all about product rollout, or all about user story mapping, as an example. And so we go through different topics, and we use real life examples of people who are doing it or have done it. And so that's kind of the flavor of the work that we do in our guilds. Another way that we keep our community kind of thriving, people, everybody engaged, is we have like platforms like Slack that helps the community ask questions and share interesting insights, articles, methods together, right? So that same group of people in our guild are also like in our Slack, and it's just for, right? There's no other kind of people. It's just for the practitioners, just for the designers. to be able to share with each other and kind of ping each other, right, about that, and have a community to ask questions or get guidance. We also have our own published frameworks and methodologies around the work to help really designers move quickly through their work, inventing the wheel. So really good examples, like I have so many research plans. You don't have to create one from scratch. Here's a template for you. Do recruitment. This is how you do it. If you need to, ideas on storyboarding or ideas on facilitating workshops, here are a bunch of different templates and tools to be able to do that. So I think that's kind of really interesting as well. And then my final thing would be access to one-on-one practice support. So we also have the ability for our designers to have one-on-one support with me or my team to do kind of like conversations at a more detailed level. Where they're saying, hey, I'm experiencing something within my team. I need some guidance. I need some help specifically. So I think that's how we kind of keep people aligned. And of course, I would also plug that designers should endeavor to be active at their local level in their cities. Another way to be in that community is to get involved with the design community in your city, and even in your national or international level if you can, right? Like in your city or in your province or territory or state or wherever you are, get involved, figure out where those communities are, and I mean that's a really great way to kind of align yourself kind of with what's happening out there.
And that's really good. So, using community that you already have, using resources that you already have, but also offering them one-on-one help is, I think, really a great thing that you guys are doing. Allowing them that space to openly say, "Hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help?" That's amazing. And going back on the guild, so I'm really interested in it. So you take is it a whole day, or do you take a few hours of the day? How do you organize it?
1.5 hours every month for the guild.
Okay, so you keep it kind of short and educational, but also helpful. Nice.
Oh, I did forget to mention one thing. We also have a newsletter. We do a surface designer newsletter every month for our community, so that they have another mechanism to get information. So like our insights, what's going on, interesting topics, things that we share internally.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. And do you also use the newsletter to like update everyone, or is it just like educational content?
No, absolutely. Update everyone. This is the upcoming guild. This is our guest speaker coming. Check them out. Here's an interesting article about our topic next week or next month, that kind of thing.
Nice. Thank you. And what do you, again, going back to the integration of design, product, and teams trying to do it successfully, what are some of the common mistakes you see them making?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think there's a couple of common mistakes or traps that teams fall into, right? And I think it's really important that we talk about teams because you are a part of a team, right? When you're working in a cross-functional approach, it's not just you, even though you're a designer, but it's really the team that has to be successful. So I think, one of the big ones I say is teams really, some of the traps they fall into are like not testing ideas or their story early on, right? And they really want to rush to, high fidelity mockups or prototypes. And I think, there's a real appetite now to do a lot more concept testing with real users before you get down the road of like sharp Figma, or, really high fidelity experiences that's taking a designer maybe 1 week or 2 weeks to build, to test. It's a bit slow, right? It's quite slow. And I think there's a lot of effort and investment when people rush to high fidelity mockups. And it's like, let's spend a lot more time testing ideas first. Let's test the ideas a couple times and let's test a bunch of different ideas before we get into kind of medium fidelity, high fidelity mockups. So I think that's kind of one of the big traps that people fall into. They just rush and they just rush to high fidelity. I think another one is maybe a bit of an over reliance on really deep detail in like user stories in the place of collaboration. So instead of having a conversation they fall into that like conveyor belt trap where they want a lot of documentation and a lot of detail story
Mhm.
about like, you should do XYZ 1 2 3, and why didn't you tell me about this edge case and that edge case and that edge case. And I think like uh, sometimes developers can get lost in the very deep detail of something specific and not understand like what is the spirit of the service, like what is the thing you're trying to actually, what's the experience supposed to be, right? And I
Yeah.
think the way you get around that is really working on like collaboration, right? And having a lot of working sessions and open communication with your team, right? When I was doing a lot of this work myself, I would be meeting with my development team and my architecture team uh, probably 3 times a week for at least 2 or 3 hours, just talking about this is the work, this is the detail behind the user stories, like this is the spirit, this is the workflow, this is the understanding, as opposed to trying to write it all and then throwing it over in a Jira ticket or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I think the other one would be the last one I would mention as a common mistake would be teams trying to really get to 100% feature completion before people are ready to release and get feedback from users. So they're very scared to test early. They really are, maybe, and this pressure from stakeholders or from their organizations, but they're afraid to test early. And so they're trying to like, okay, just one more feature, one more quality of life feature, one more screen, one more notification, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, you need to test the core functionality of the product first, uh, and of the service first. Are you achieving these goals? Are you hitting the right experience? You can't continue. You can't wait until the end to test it. You have to test it earlier, and so you have to release earlier, and like that's really the fear, right? People are just scared to release and get feedback, and they wait until it gets really big, and then they get a lot of really negative feedback at once, and that's very difficult to deal with.
So it's avoidable by testing early, right?
Yeah, releasing smaller and testing early.
Yeah. Makes sense. And you mentioned just now, but also before when we spoke, is something that's called collaborative storytelling, and how um, it basically, you said, drives product success. So I'm wondering how that can help. What is the example of the technique, and how have you been using it effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's really, like I mentioned, I think one of the key things is trying to reduce the reliance on that detailed handoff process, right? So, okay, how do we rethink what that looks like? And so the idea is to create moments where all of you are in a room or in front of a board and actually go through the user flow, the data flow, and how the interactions would work, right? As a team, as an entire team. I think that's really important. The idea is that is happening all the time. Those conversations about what we're working on is really important. And I think it is also important to think about when we work in our epics, how we determine as a team the most important stories to hit, right? And I think like that's a part of that conversation, right? So it's like, okay, what's really critical? And then how do we make sure that we're hitting the right things? And we do this with what I call weekly story time.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a method that we use. And really, this is where the designers are, like I said, talking about the experience of the spirit of the product experience, right? And so the developers should understand what the user experience is and what the user is trying to accomplish in the journey, right? And uh, and the way that we do this is by inviting our developers into our research. So, how do I create a great collaborative environment? I want to take my developers with me on a road trip. When I go out to the field, I want them to do observation with me, or I want them to sit in on an interview with me, and they're just listening. That I'm facilitating the interview. I'm taking the notes, and then they're going to debrief as a team at the end of the day, and we're going to go pull out our insights from our conversations. Um, and the idea is that this idea of like taking the developers with us right from the beginning, involving them in their research is extremely important. It's kind of one of the keys for a really good team is to get the developers in early to do that work. And
Mm-hmm.
I've done this like in almost all of my projects. So if we have developers, we say come on board, and we'll be like, no, you have to come to these interviews meetings. They want to like focus on maybe technical stuff, and it's like, no, you have to come and like listen to these interviews or come to this workshop. Maybe you can help facilitate it, or you can help be involved in it. But I think that's really key, and so that's how kind of we really build a bit of a culture of collaboration internally, and a bit of understanding and empathy with the user up front, right? Because developers need to have empathy. They need to be able to understand like what it is that we're really working on. And then I think that even extends to our stakeholders too. So I've actually invited some pretty senior stakeholders to also sit in on an interview with me, sit in on come to observe the front line with me, or do like secret shopping, or like secret shopping, mystery shopping exercises, where they kind of come and just look at a service or experience, or be a part of a workshop where they're just observing and they're just trying to understand. And you wouldn't believe how much that changes people's point of view when they actually hear directly from users.
Yeah.
And of course, our UX folks, our UX designers,
Mm-hmm.
can really kind of continue that thread with one-on-one meetings with UX designers and devs to really go over specific interactions. So it's not just enough to like throw over a Jira ticket and here's your link to your Figma Figma files, but also like just spending the time, like I said, right, really talking about like this is kind of what we're trying to get done, because we all know that the design is not always like development's not pixel perfect, right? Like design is close, but what's actually developed is what's important. And so there's always a bit of a gap there. And so the better that we can close that gap makes for a better product.
And I love the fact that you were including them from the very beginning and also having them see it in real life. I think it really changes. It changes the way they are going to approach the task later on. And are there any instances where the opposite happens, where your designers are in the development team included?
Again, yeah, and so I mean, absolutely. I think some of these developers, they're very smart people. I always say like the developers are the smart people. We're the empathetic people, I guess. But yeah, like I do think it's very important for us to understand a little bit about, at least from like architecture, like we're talking about technology, like what does this thing do, right? How is this thing actually kind of built at a high level? Like I don't think we go very deep in terms of the specifics of code and that kind of thing, but I do think that all the designers should have a clear understanding of like how things work uh,
Mhm.
at a top level. Like how does a service get delivered? Because the technology is a huge part of how most services are delivered in this age. And so we do understand how technology works at a high level, right? Whether it's like automation. Oh, I understand now. This is the part of the service that's automated. This is where things get generated. This is where payments get distributed. This is how they get distributed. This is the logic of that. And so I think there's a lot of like logic and understanding there, and a lot of close work between development and design.
For sure. I think that the more they talk about, but from what I gathered so far, the more they talk about, the more they're informed about each other's processes, the better it is going to be in the end, the collaboration and I guess the product as well. And what about some organizations that you heard that wanted to adopt these practices? Did they have any concerns, and do you have any advice for them who want to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things when it comes to getting started. Some of the big questions or concerns that we get from organizations is that they think that they know what their users want, and so everything's kind of driven from inside out, right? So they say, we know what our users like. We know our users. They want feature XYZ 1 2 3, and the clear answer to this is like we always need to be talking to users and testing throughout the product development lifecycle, not just at the beginning, right? And so where the interaction, where the real play happens is that's very good. Like our stakeholders do know a lot about the problems that they're facing, what their users want at a high level, even if they don't know like what part of the problem we should be solving
Mm-hmm.
and how. But the key is that we want the design functionality to show its value by giving a mechanism to always be talking to users all the way through, right? It's not just enough to say, yeah, I did a survey up front and we know what our users want. They want, more blue buttons. That's not enough, right? We need to be able to we need to be able to actually continue to have conversations and go back to our users, right? And so the idea is that we need to release often to test with our users. So I think that's one thing. And I think another big concern that a lot of like organizations have is they say, well, how do I know that the software that you're building is going to work? Like, will I have all the requirements if we do it in this way? And I always say, just because we're working agile way, it doesn't mean that we can't signal our intent or talk about the broader experience, talk about the vision. I think we should all have a clear vision. We might not have all the details in like a Gantt chart telling you about that, but I think we should be able to talk about what we're doing now, what we're going to do next, and what we're going to do later, and be able to paint a broader vision so the stakeholders can get on board with that. And that's where like storytelling comes into play, right? At a high level, right? And being able to talk about the whole experience, what part or parts of the experience we're going to work on first, but there's still the keyword there being first. Because stakeholders, they hear, oh, that's what you're going to do for me. You're not going to build the rest of it, or you're not going to give me all the features I want. But it's like, no, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep building, testing, learning from users. But we're going to keep building on this. We're not just stopping after we've built the first thing. And so I think that's where design can really help, is really getting involved in that space, and really bringing the voice of the user forward. So that stakeholders can understand, like, oh yes, like they're telling us what, their behaviors is kind of informing us on what we should be doing, right? And I think sometimes stakeholders they need that outside in point of view.
Definitely. And I think I agree with you saying like design should be the voice of the user right here. So definitely leveraging storytelling, learning storytelling, skilling yourself in that skill is gonna, give you some advantage, right? And when it comes to designers and how can they better, I mean, what I want to ask actually is what are some of the key strategies that designers can use to establish themselves in the product team, and how can they position themselves in those teams?
Yeah. Number one thing I would say, and the most important thing I would say, is that first and foremost, be human. Teams are, I guess there's some AI now, but teams are made up of humans, and you have to build trust and respect for each other in a team, right? There's no team that can just be amazing when they first are put together. You have to do that storming, norming, forming relationships, and that's when you really get the impact. And so that means that you need to have to invest in your team and get to know your team and understand your team and really be empathetic for each other, understand each other's point of view, and build on that. And the way you do that is by being responsive, being there, being
Mhm.
present, and being respectful of each other's opinions and being constructive. It's not about like, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't make sense. It's like, tell me more about that. I'm interested in understanding more. What about this? Like what about that and this? These type of conversations. So it's really important. And I think using data and the user research to inform and validate design decisions, I think, is really important as well. So that's another way that designers can better integrate. They can show, like I said, back to that idea of like show your design insights when you're doing them. And it provides a lot of understanding, empathy, be like, oh, okay, I get what you're doing here, and now I trust you to represent the voice of the user in the team. And I think that's really important. And it helps us communicate our design rationale clearly and effectively, right? So once we start to be able to do that, then we'll have more room to leave space for business design, which is the idea of like working with our executives and bringing in other points of view and having the
Mhm.
team all understand like this is the user point of view, this is kind of the business point of view, because ultimately what we're solving is something in the middle, right? There's always something like that that we have to drive together. And then I think the other thing too is like just designers not being defensive, right? Just being very open to feedback and willing to iterate on designs. I like to say no egos. I know
Mhm.
everybody has an ego, like I get
Yeah.
it, but for me, I never, I like to approach things as like I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm never the subject matter expert. I'm probably the facilitator and the person who's there to start the conversation and provide different thoughts or approaches on how to think about things, and
Mhm.
that same approach should be applied within the team. So I want to bring my architect, my developers on to give me different thoughts and ideas. What do you think about this problem? Like from your lens, how would you approach this thing? And so all of this, I think, ultimately wraps that trust conversation together, right? And once you build the trust, then you have a good team. Then you will have a pretty good team.
So, empathy, curiosity, but also showing what you're doing should should be good for you. And that is from the team view. But what about business goals? How can designers really align themselves with business goals and show that what they're doing is going towards the same goal?
Yeah, so I think number one is you got to get a little bit into the language that the stakeholders understand, a little bit into um, the strategy and the objectives of the organization. Like what is the environment around the problem area that we're
Mhm.
looking and stakeholders don't understand design language very well, but we can communicate in ways that they can understand us, right?
Yeah.
And so I need to understand a little bit about the way that they think and the way that they work, right? And so yeah, designers should understand a little bit about finance and a little bit about accounting and a little bit about technology, and a little, of course, a lot about design, and a little bit about recruiting or things. Like I think you need to know a little bit about everything as a designer, and then it'll help you frame design decisions in terms of business impact and user value, right? And so the idea of being, hey, like I can make a connection between what the work I'm doing and the impact that we're having as a business from value. And you do that through like your metrics. What are the metrics we want to move in our work, right? What are the things that we want to actually improve? I know that I did my design work, this process when I first looked at it and I did a mapping of the current state. It took 6 weeks to do this process. Well, I know like the real, really difficult part is when they accept the application form. It takes them a long time to review it. Okay, well, let's focus on that area and get it down
Mhm.
to 2 weeks, right? And these metrics are the real movers of value, and they translate into money, cost, experience, and better user experience as well, of course, right? And so all of it kind of is kind of one package. And then I think uh, trying to figure out, like I said, like how to collaborate closely with stakeholders. And so one of the ways that you can do that from business value perspective is just like you have a sprint review
Mhm.
or a demo, the demoing every 2 weeks. You should be also be doing that at a bigger table with your executives, maybe monthly, where you're showing them or even inviting them to your demos every once in a while. So you're trying to get them exposure into your work. So you're learning a bit about them, and they're learning a bit about you, and they're starting to also gain trust and confidence in your work. And so that'll help, and that'll open them up for uh, better conversations around their business objectives, and and create the trusts so they can trust you with their thoughts and ideas, which will eventually, of course, lead to a better experience.
Yeah, and you will also better understand then what you should focus on as well, I guess. Um, and it helps when you say it like that, when you want to think about what they're thinking and understand their language. I think that's kind of an advanced step up from the usual design work that you do every day. So I believe it's something that people who have aspirations to move into leadership roles will do. So if you have one piece of advice for those who want to step into leadership roles like yours, what should they focus on the most?
Okay, this one I have two to tell you. I think they're really important, and I always say this to a bunch of people that I coach and mentor. Number one, put your hand up to lead work. There's a difference between leading a successful team and project or being a part of a successful team and project. And so when you lead, you are showing a initiative, but B, you're putting yourself in situations where you have to think about something holistically. You have to think about the outcome of the thing that you're trying to solve for, and the team you're trying to lead, right? And that will automatically begin to raise your thinking about the problem space. So leading is so important. Like you got to put your, and you don't have to lead big things. You can lead small things. You can lead volunteer projects, side projects, but get used to leading and like getting to an outcome. That's like one of the step number one. And that also goes hand in hand, I think, would be the idea of being responsible, working on business relationships with stakeholders and showing the outcome of your work. Once you're responsive and you're like a people person and a leader, that's how you kind of get into that design leadership world, right? So you have the design technical skills already. There's so many great designers out there, and I don't think there's a shortage of design talent in the industry. But uh, I think the reality is though it's a lot more about the people skill and being
Mm,
able to kind of manage complex situations. And then when you do that, that's really how you kind of propel into that leadership, into design leadership space.
yeah, that's actually a very, very good advice. Thank you. Well, thank you for answering my questions, right? And now it's time for questions from people who joined us to watch. So I see already a few of them here. I will jump straight in, but if anyone who is watching wants to ask something, feel free to drop your questions now. Um, Here is the first question that we have. This is from uh, Franjo. He says, so this is a great thought of being more active on the local level, but what do I do when design services are very unappreciated in my area? Um, that's a good
Understood.
question, right?
Yeah, a great question, Frankie. I think one of the things you can do is start to look at kind of the broader design communities outside the local level. So, there is things like all the different UX kind of communities, the Service Design Network. Personally, I like LinkedIn to kind of be involved and keep my eye on a lot of different things. And when I see the ability to see different conferences, different events happening across the world, and I can attend them, you know, I try to attend them if I can. And so the idea is that you're going out and you're looking for a kind of events and where other like-minded people are. Obviously, now with our ability to do so much of our work remotely and online, we're able to attend a lot of conferences virtually, or even a lot of like coffee chats, design book clubs. There's so many things out there. You just got to look for them. And so there's probably a local product community and a local UX community, maybe a local design community, but there's definitely one at the national level wherever you are, like wherever you're at a country level. There will be, and then in the region for sure. Like, I mean, it's everywhere now. There's design is happening everywhere. So there's always people to find. I think just being involved in that and looking for stuff outside the local level if you feel like there's nothing locally.
Um, yeah, locally, he also a follow up is awareness in the local community. If I can jump in and say, why not start your own? If there is nothing right there, why not start it? But Foot, please
Yeah,
feel free.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Start by go to Meetup or whatever your local meetup app is, and start a local design coffee. Like, and just start it up yourself. I'm sure you're gonna get 20, 30 people who are like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that is." and they'll just show up, and you'll begin to build some buzz around your local community. I think that's pretty much how all of these design communities start anyway. So I think that's a good place to start.
Exactly. And starting small is still fine as long as it's starting. Um, Thank you. For next question we have from Charmine. What are the key elements to include in a design newsletter? Okay, we mentioned it. The challenge I faced was that people struggled to relate to it. It seemed they were only celebrating successes. It's a really great question.
Yeah, great question, Charmine. I think one of them is to talk about great work. So that's like section one. I think another one is to have a point of view about an interesting topic or something that's going to pull the reader into kind of exploring an area that maybe they haven't thought of before, or a different area that they haven't explored in a while. And then I think it's always about leaving the reader with something to reflect on, right? And so in the newsletter, being able to say, like, these are some of the interesting, threads that you can continue to follow after you've read this newsletter about content that's going to be valuable, that's going to help you as a designer, um, improve your improve your craft, improve your impact and outcomes.
Great advice. Um, Thank you, Charmine. From Sean, we have what advice would you give for trying to shift the mindset of leaders on teams who lean more towards a conveyor belt method of work and are risk averse to a more cross functional or co design approach that we spoke about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to answer this question. I think number one is trying to find places in the organization where it makes sense to do things in a bit more iterative way, or a bit more, we'll call it adaptive way. I think there are clear projects where there is a lot of risk, and maybe it is something that should be developed in more of a traditional manner. But I think the reality is most problems in organizations can be approached in an agile way, and I think one of the ways to kind of move that needle is to talk a little bit about what are the things, like why do we do user research, like what are some of the things that we do in this approach, and what benefits do we get out of doing it this way. So a lot of times stakeholders don't understand like why it's valuable. They just think it's faster or different, like, oh, you're just building it faster for me, or you just want to not give me a roadmap or something. But they don't really understand the value of like more iterative user feedback and understanding, right? And so I think a key is trying to explain the value of why this methodology makes sense. And I think the value is things like the ability to get feedback in real time, understand and course correct earlier on, and really hear from the people who are going to use your product or service. And that's actually risk mitigation. It actually reduces your risk. It's probably a lot riskier if you spend a lot of money doing something and making a really big thing, and you release it and it's not good. And so I think the idea of them thinking that it's risky, it's actually more risky if you do a really, really big thing, because you're taking a really big bet. And so the idea is like, how do you make smaller bets, and how do you test smaller ideas, and showing them that's really reducing the risk.
All of that. Um, Thank you, Sean. I hope that answered your question. Next one is from Krista. Krista says, do you have strategies on how to initially convince managers and developers to relocate development time to design and research? Also, something I was curious about. How do you get that buy in from them?
Yeah, especially early days. Um, Make it simple for them. When I talk about user discovery, so we're starting kind of the early processes. They will also be doing probably their technical discovery, or like a technical understanding of kind of what's out there in their environment that they're working in. And so you don't have to overburden them with it. I think it's something as simple as just come to one or two, just so that you can hear firsthand, and so that they can still have, they can still feel like they're doing some efficient work from a development perspective. but you're still allowing them to do it. So it's something as simple as saying, just 1 hour a sprint, come for a design interview, or 2 hours a sprint or something like that, or attend our workshop. I think it's really important for you to hear directly from the users. And I think that's the key thing is to be able to tell managers and developers, like, this will help us save a lot of time on development because you're going to hear a bit more of the insights directly from the users. And we don't need that much time. Just come to 1 or 2 of them. You don't have to come to all of them. You don't have to spend your whole day in interviews, and that's our job. But at least come to 1 or 2 of them to get a bit of an understanding of kind of where we're going and what people are saying, so you can better design code, which is going to save you a bunch of time when you understand a bit more about the problem.
Definitely. And I want to bring up, just so you can see Krista's background from where this comes from. So she says, I worked in an Agile Scrum environment where all of my efforts to focus on users was shut down because we were pressed to meet pre-planned sprint goals and maintain velocity. So it really boils down to how do you communicate that with everyone? How do you communicate, hey, we need to be user-centric once again, in that short span of time? So I love the way you approached it and say you don't have to do a big thing. You can just explain you can come to 1 or 2. But do you have any advice for people who are struggling in this environment to get people on board to be again user-centric?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think there's a lot of work there around trust, building trust up front, beginning to understand the language of the stakeholders, and trying to really understand what's driving this question. So if I look at this idea of they want to shut it down because the velocity is not being met, right? And so it's okay, well, what exactly are you aiming for, and why is it, why are you going that fast? What's pushing the velocity? What's the conversation around when things have to be completed, and how does user research improve that experience or improve the outcome of what we're building? Because building a worse product faster isn't any better. Okay, so I want you to be fast and not do user research. Well, it doesn't mean the product's going to be good. It's just you just made it worse faster. But if I put user research, I'm going to allow myself the ability to test with them earlier, so that I ensure that the product that I am releasing in our first release is high quality. And so I think that piece, Krista, is like a translation, is being able to explain the value of where user research fits in and why it makes Agile better. And in the language that they understand. We're going to reduce a lot of the rework. We're going to release something that we know people find intuitive and has a great experience. We can do usability. We can understand a lot more about how people are using that. Whereas you take a lot more risk. So yeah, you might finish a sprint or 2 earlier, but you're missing critical points of feedback to know that you're building the right thing. And so it's about that, right? It's about back to that risk mitigation conversation, right? Reducing the risk by getting feedback from the people who are going to use our product or service. And if we do that, then we're on the right path. If we just build things that we want to build and we just build them fast, it doesn't mean that they're going to be good.
Awesome. I think that is all for the questions that we had. Let me remove this off the screen. Yeah, I wanted to take this time to thank you, Fouad, for joining us today, for taking the time, and for the lovely session that we had. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure that everyone who joined also, will take away some valuable insights. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to post, and I will try my best to get some answers, maybe even post session. Thank you, Fouad. Thank you, everyone else who joined us. Do you maybe have a few words you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, just want to say thank you very much for joining me, or for inviting me to the webinar. And again, thanks to the UXL team, excited to kind of continue to do this. I'm going to be hopefully releasing a course around collaboration in cross-functional teams on UXL sometime soon. So maybe some real more kind of nitty-gritty details around strategies and ways for designers to better work within product. And of course, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I'm always happy to kind of coach or mentor folks who are in their design journey, kind of those beginner intermediate folks who are looking to get better and get closer to design leadership. I'm always, of course, happy to have conversations about that.
Thank you. I will just drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat here for everyone who wants to connect. Yeah, thank you very much. Once again, had a lovely time talking to you. Hope everyone else did as well. Stay put and stay on the lookout for the course that's coming. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of the day and hope to see you all soon.
Bye-bye.